Hello friends, this video on Ray Optics Part 42 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Please make sure that you have watched all the videos till Part 41 before going ahead with Part 42. What's the thought that comes in your mind when you think of the human eye? When you think of your eye? It is something which enables us to see this beautiful world around us, right? So, we have this curiosity to know how does our eye work, what enables us to see things around us. So in order to understand how does an eye work, it is important to know the construction or the constituents of the eye. So let us see the components of eye. So here you see, which you must be thinking it's a complicated diagram, right? With so many labels and all. So let us discuss about each component one by one. So the first comes the cornea. Now, let me first tell you, this is a side view of the eye. I mean, the eye as we see, it is just the front view, right? But actually, eye is nothing but it is a kind of a spherical ball. Right? You can imagine it in this way that let us suppose there is a cavity and you have a ball and you put that ball into that cavity. So what will happen if you see it from the front? You will see it as a flat object. For example, let us suppose you have a sheet like this, which has a cavity in this way. Now you take a ball or you take some object which is oval in shape and you place this object in this way. Now what will happen if you look at this object somewhere from here? What will you see? You will just get a view like this entire plate with something like this. You will not get to know that this object is nothing but a kind of spherical thing because it is put inside a cavity. Right? Similarly, our eye is also like a spherical ball which is placed inside. So this is the side view of the eye. So it says that cornea, what is cornea? This is our cornea. That is the outermost covering of the eye. So that means the portion which we see, there is a thin covering over this portion. So this is the cornea. Now I will relate it to what we see also. I mean the eye which you see or which I see, I'll relate these components to that also in the next slide. But for now you just try to understand the internal structure. So cornea is nothing but the outermost covering. Next comes the aqueous humor. So after cornea you have aqueous humor. So this is aqueous humor. It is nothing but a fluid which has a certain refractive index. So this fluid, it is a kind of it is a watery fluid. So it has got some refractive index, right? After that we have the pupil. This is the pupil and this is the pupil. So here you have the pupil. So you are going in order from outside to inside. So the outermost one is cornea. Next is a fluid-like structure called aqueous humor. Then comes the pupil. What is pupil? Pupil is, you can consider that pupil is the door of the eye. Pupil is the place from which light enters into the eye. Because if light doesn't enter inside the eye, you will not be able to see things, right? Because I told you before, whatever we see, whenever there is a visibility, it is because of light. If you switch off the light in a room, you will not see anything which is present inside the room. So things are visible only when the light is switched on, right? So what is this pupil? Pupil is nothing but, you can remember it like this. Pupil is the door of the eye from which light enters the eye. And also remember that light enters the eye through pupil, but it doesn't come back, right? So it is a one-way door. So only entry is allowed, no exit. Next is iris. What is iris? Iris is the one which controls the pupil. So iris is the one who decides how much the pupil has to open. Whether the door has to be kept open to welcome 100 guests or the door has to be open very little so that only one person can enter. So iris is the one who controls the pupil, that how much light should be allowed to enter. So what is the function of iris? For example, when you go in an area where there is a bright light, so very huge light, so in that case it sees that since so much of light is there, and if the entire light cannot come in, right, so the iris will change the size of the pupil accordingly, so that it can allow appropriate amount of light inside. Similarly, when there is very dim light, that means if the size of the pupil remains very small at that time, then it will become difficult. We will not be able to see. So the iris will allow the pupil to allow as much light as possible, because anyways there is insufficient light outside. So let the maximum amount of it enter the eye so that we can have a better view. So this is the purpose of pupil and iris. Next is the lens. A lens has to be there, right? Because of this, I am telling you how we can say that the eye is nothing but an optical instrument. So here also the same things happen. Light is entering inside. The light will pass through a lens. So refraction will take place. So for us, there is an object outside. So the light from the object enters the eye. It passes through the lens, undergoes refraction, and an image is formed. So the same thing is happening, and then we are able to view that image, right? So it is very similar to refraction by lens, or the image formation by a lens. So here we have a lens. Then we have something called ciliary muscles. So this is the lens, and these are the ciliary muscles. So what do these ciliary muscles do? These ciliary muscles basically help to change the focal length of the lens. Now this lens, eye lens, is little different. It has got some flexibility. This lens can increase its focal length, this length can decrease its focal length, and this flexibility is provided by the ciliary muscles. The ciliary muscles are attached to the lens in such a way that it can flatten the lens, it can make it thinner. So the focal length will keep changing accordingly. Now when and how does the ciliary muscle changes the focal length? It depends on different situations. So we will look into that also. Then comes the vitreous humor, that is another aqueous, or that is another fluid-like structure. So here if you see, this entire region is filled with a fluid-like structure again, which is known as vitreous humor. And thereafter comes the most important one, that is the retina. Where is retina? So this region is the retina. So this is the region where image is actually formed. So retina is the place where the image is formed, and retina consists of something called rods and cones. And what are these rods and cones? They are nothing but receptors. That means retina is first point is retina is the place where image is formed, and secondly, retina consists of two different components, rods and cones. Now what are their purpose? These components are actually receptors which will take this image to the brain. I mean the eye. What happens inside the eye? There is an object, an image is formed inside the eye. Now when we see that image and we understand, for example, let us suppose there is a book in front of me. I see that book. I am not only seeing that book, but by looking at that book, I am also able to understand that this is a book. That means my brain is coming into play. My brain is also playing some role, right? So viewing something also requires an involvement of your optic nerve, right? It also, so that these nerves, so these receptors, what they do, they basically transmit the signal. I mean, they basically transmit this entire image through the optic nerves, and then the brain actually converts it into what we see. So the brain actually helps us to understand also what we are seeing. So these rods and cones are nothing but receptors which try to understand what we are seeing and then transmit the same to the brain through the optic nerve, right? Okay, So now we got to know what are the different components present inside the eye. So let us have a quick review of the same. So we talked about cornea. So where is the cornea in our eye? So now here this is the front view and this is the side view. So cornea is nothing but it is like a thin plastic covering on this eye. So whatever we are seeing, this eye, it has got a thin covering, that is cornea. When we talk about pupil, this is the pupil. So this black dot inside which we see in the eye, that is actually the place through which light enters our eye. And what is iris? Iris was the one which controls how much pupil has to open. So iris is this region. So this region is iris, which will control the amount of light which has to enter through the pupil. Right? And then the remaining parts, that is aqueous humor and your lens and so on and so forth, we are not able to see them from the front view because lens and all, they are behind all these things. So from the front we are able to see only the cornea, the pupil and the iris, right? But the behind structures are not visible to us. So that is why, I mean, mostly in all the textbooks you will see that they will generally give this side view of the eye so that you can understand the structure inside the eye and you can also understand how image formation take place. So now how the image formation will take place, some object will lie here and some image will get formed here on the retina, so which we will be able to see, right? So we will talk about the image formation as well. Thank you. Please visit examfear.com to watch free educational videos, try free online tests, get the best quality study materials, study from the best tutors and mentors, and much more. Thank you once again.